A millionaire leaves his wife hidden in their mansion out of shame and goes to a party with another woman, but an unexpected secret could disrupt his plans. The storm raged over the isolated mansion, each thunderclap reverberating through the cold walls like an echo of Olivia's loneliness. Sitting by the window, she watched the lightning illuminate the cactus garden, attempting to distract herself with a book by Octavio Paz. The words, though beautiful, only amplified the emptiness consuming her soul. Suddenly, a noise cut through the monotony. At first soft, like leaves rustling in the wind, but soon it grew more unsettling, almost human. Olivia froze. A flash of lightning illuminated the courtyard, briefly revealing a figure cloaked by a hat walking between the cacti. She opened the door, but there was no one there, only rain and wind. Inside, again trembling, she heard the most disturbing sound, a female voice, clear and urgent, calling her name. Fear overtook her. Who could know her so well in this isolation? Something was wrong. Around midnight she heard something again. Light footsteps, distinct yet faint, echoed down the corridor. Olivia sat up suddenly, her heart pounding. It wasn't the usual sounds of the house, the creaking wood or the breeze that whistled through the old windows. This was real. Slowly she rose, bare feet touching the cold floor, and made her way to the patio. The weak light of the moon cast shadows on the cacti, and that's when she saw a silhouette. It wasn't the same figure from before. It was a woman. "Who's there?" she called, her voice low but thick with tension. The woman turned, revealing a firm and determined face. She had short hair, damp from the night's humidity, and wore a simple, soaked coat. Olivia felt an instinct to run, but something in the woman's stance made her hesitate. "Olivia?" The woman's voice was clear, unwavering. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Olivia asked, clutching her robe tightly to her body, trying to hide her fear. The woman took a few steps forward, stopping just a few feet from Olivia. She didn't seem intimidated. "I'm Anna, Grace Anderson. I'm a journalist." She paused, studying Olivia's reaction. "I came here because I believe you deserve to know the truth." Olivia stood still, her eyes locked on Anna. It was as if her body wanted to react, but her mind was in shock. "What truth? How did you get in here?" she demanded, her voice quivering. "I came because I needed to speak to you. I thought you'd be alone tonight, as you usually are." Anna's voice was direct, almost cold, but it didn't feel hostile. Olivia furrowed her brow, her insecurity giving way to indignation. "I don't know what you're talking about. You have no right to invade my home. This is what you call a home." Grace glanced around, her tone dripping with irony. "This place is your prison. You know it, Olivia. Don't pretend you don't know." The words hit hard, like sharp jabs. Olivia tried to hold back her anger, but there was something in Anna's firmness that shook her. "My husband takes care of me. This is not a prison. It's my home." Her voice faltered, even as she spoke the words. Anna tilted her head, studying Olivia for a moment before replying. "That's what Ryan wants you to believe. While you're here alone, he's living another life. You know this, don't you? Or would you rather pretend you don't see it?" The mention of Ryan's name by this stranger made Olivia shudder. She had seen the photos of Ryan with other women, but she had never wanted to confront him. She didn't know if it was fear or resignation. "Why are you saying this?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "Because the world knows you, Olivia, but not in the way you think. They call you the invisible wife of businessman Ryan." Grace stepped forward, and Olivia instinctively stepped back. "Invisible, Olivia. That's what you are to him." The words echoed in Olivia's mind like a distant bell, but persistent. Grace continued, "Do you think this is living? He hides you here while he parades around with Charlotte Mitchell? The same Charlotte who's become the talk of every social event in Denver? Is this what you deserve? Olivia felt her face burn, but she didn't respond. Every word was a blade cutting through the excuses she had repeated to herself. Before she could speak, heavy footsteps echoed through the corridor. Security guards appeared, guns drawn, and immediately positioned themselves between Olivia and Anna. "Mrs. Olivia, it's under control. We'll remove this woman now," one of the guards said, eyeing Grace with hostility. "Wait!" Olivia tried to protest, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. Anna was grabbed by the arm and escorted toward the exit. Even as the guards took her, she turned to Olivia, shouting above the turmoil, "Think about what I said, Olivia. You deserve to be seen. Don't let him erase you." Olivia stood frozen, her body tense, as Anna's voice faded into the distance. She was alone again, but something inside her had changed. Invisible wife. The phrase echoed in her mind as she walked back into the house. Sitting on the living room sofa, she held the poetry book she had abandoned hours earlier. For the first time, her hands trembled not from the cold, but from the wave of doubt now consuming her. If you're watching this far, I'm sure you're liking it, so I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel. The morning after Anna's visit arrived slowly, the weight of the night still hanging in the air. Olivia had barely slept, her mind replaying the conversation over and over. Sitting on the porch with a cup of coffee forgotten in her hands, she felt as though the mansion had grown even larger, more empty, more suffocating. The words "invisible wife" kept echoing in her mind, stirring an unease she couldn't ignore. Around noon, the ringing of the phone broke her thoughts. Olivia hesitated for a moment before picking it up. It was Ryan. She hadn't heard from him in days, and the last time he had been in the mansion already felt like a distant memory. "Olivia," Ryan's voice on the other end was clear, but devoid of warmth. "How are you?" "Fine," she answered, but her voice was low, almost weak. "Great. I just wanted to let you know I'll be staying in Denver for a few more days. I've got some important meetings." His tone was practical, distant, as if the call were just another obligation to be ticked off. "Okay," she replied automatically, but couldn't hide the pain she felt in his indifference. "I've got to go. I'm at an event with some investors." Before she could respond, Ryan hung up. Olivia was left holding the phone, staring into the empty space. There was no "I love you," no real inquiry into how she was feeling or how she had been passing her days in the vast loneliness of their mansion. It was always like this. The Ryan she had known before the marriage seemed to have vanished completely. Crushed by her husband's coldness, she sought distraction in anything at all. That's when she noticed the tablet that Ryan had left behind the last time he had been at the mansion. Without thinking much, she grabbed the device, perhaps to read the news, or something to pull her away from the anxiety gnawing at her. But when she unlocked the screen, the reality that awaited her was far more cruel. Photos, several pictures of Ryan, laughing with Charlotte Mitchell. He smiled at the cameras, exuding the confidence and charm that had once won her over. Charlotte, on the other hand, was the epitome of social perfection, stunning, charismatic, and at ease by Ryan's side. The captions under the photos were even more humiliating. "The most elegant couple of the night," or "Ryan and Charlotte, the perfect pair at the gala." Olivia felt a wave of nausea rise in her. Her hands began to shake as she scrolled through the images, each one more painful than the last. It was as if she no longer existed, as though Ryan had completely erased her from his life. Invisible wife. Anna's words came rushing back with full force. She set the tablet aside, unable to look at the images any longer, and got up to walk through the house. The mansion, always grand and imposing, now felt like a suffocating labyrinth. She passed a mirror in the hallway, and when she caught a glimpse of her own reflection, she stopped abruptly. A woman of elegance stared back at her. Her hair was perfectly styled and her outfit was immaculate, designer, but her eyes Her eyes reflected only emptiness. Olivia stepped closer to the mirror, almost as though she expected to see someone else there, but there was nothing but a stranger. The memory of how Ryan had been during the early years of their courtship flooded her. He had been charming, attentive, with a sparkle in his eyes that seemed reserved only for her. He used to write her notes, surprise her with little gestures, and make her feel alive. But after the wedding, everything had changed. Little by little, he began to mold her, like a sculptor working on a statue. He hired etiquette consultants, stylists, nutritionists, and even coaches to teach her how to behave in his social circles. At first, Olivia had thought it was all for love, that Ryan was helping her fit into his world, but over time she realized he was erasing her essence. The woman who loved to read, who enjoyed walking barefoot and spent hours tending to the garden, had disappeared. All that remained was an idealized, polished, empty version. Olivia looked at her reflection one more time, her eyes brimming with tears, and felt a deep pain in her chest. Ryan had built a world where she was seen as an accessory, not as a person. Now, everything made sense. The distance, the parties in Denver, Charlotte. She clutched the mirror, her hands trembling, and whispered to herself, "Who am I now?" The morning brought with it a heavy air, as if the days themselves couldn't erase the emotional turmoil Olivia was grappling with. Sitting at the kitchen table, a sharp silence filled the space, broken only by the sound of the kettle whistling. The tablet that had once belonged to Ryan lay beside her, a cruel reminder of the photos that had torn through the veil of her denial. She hesitated to touch it again, but something within her curiosity urged her to explore further. It was then that a new message alert appeared on the screen. The sender was an unexpected name, Grace Anderson, the journalist. Olivia furrowed her brow in surprise, but opened the message without a second thought. Olivia, your story can change lives. Women like you deserve to be seen, not erased. There is a world waiting to hear your voice. Think about it. Anna murmured. The simple words carried a weight Olivia didn't know how to process. Her story. How could her life, so full of silence and concessions, possibly inspire anyone? She slammed the tablet shut, almost as if trying to erase the message from her mind. But it was already too late. The seed had been planted. As she wandered through the mansion, lost in thought, flashes of a forgotten past began to surface. Austin. The city where she had grown up, where she had once found simple happiness. She saw herself again in the small bookstore where she worked, surrounded by the smell of both new and old books, the excitement of children picking their first stories, and the warm conversations with regular customers. It had been a humble life, but authentic. She remembered walking along cobblestone streets, feeling the sun on her face, laughing with friends without the need for masks or pretense. All of that now seemed like it belonged to someone else, a version of herself that had disappeared the day she accepted Ryan's ring. Back in the present, Olivia stopped in front of the hallway mirror. Her reflection revealed a woman of elegance, but someone she didn't recognize. A sudden, almost instinctive urge overcame her. She grabbed a coat, a purse, and the keys to one of the cars parked in the garage. Ryan wasn't there to stop her, and at that moment, it hardly mattered. For the first time, Olivia didn't ask for permission. The road to the city was winding, but as the miles passed, she felt the weight of the mansion start to lift. Arriving at the town center, she parked in a busy square and walked aimlessly, absorbing the sounds, the smells, and the colors around her. After so long in confinement, the world felt more alive than she remembered. It was then that she noticed a small flyer posted on a lamppost. NGO Mujeres Fuertes. Support and shelter for women in vulnerable situations. All are welcome. The address was nearby, and something about the simplicity of the message drew her in. Without a second thought, she followed the directions until she reached a modest but welcoming house. Upon entering, she was greeted by a woman with a warm smile who seemed to command the space with an admirable gentleness. "Welcome. I'm Sophie. Are you here to learn about our work?" Olivia hesitated but eventually nodded. "Yes, I'd like to know more." Sophie led her through the space, explaining that the NGO provided psychological support, legal assistance, and vocational training for women facing hardships. Each room told a story. Women gathered in discussion circles, sewing workshops, and even a mural decorated with messages of hope. Sitting in a small room, Olivia listened to the stories of other women, tales of overcoming courage and struggle. Some had escaped abusive relationships. Others were rebuilding their lives after devastating losses. These words, heavy with pain, but also with strength, deeply moved Olivia. For the first time, she felt she wasn't alone in her internal struggle. When she left the NGO that afternoon, something had changed. The seed Grace had planted was beginning to sprout. Olivia realized the world was much larger than the walls of the mansion, and perhaps, just perhaps, her life could have a new purpose. The late afternoon light bathed the walls of the NGO with golden hues as Olivia entered the community room, where a few women were gathered in a circle. The space exuded a warmth, a human energy that Olivia hadn't felt in a long time. Sophie, the coordinator, encouraged her to sit and listen to the stories. At first, hesitant, Olivia observed in silence. One woman named Megan shared how she had rebuilt her life after years in an abusive marriage. Another, Hannah, spoke about the challenges of raising 2 children on her own while trying to study and work. There was pain in each story, but there was also an unexpected strength that united those women. Every word made Olivia see herself reflected in them, as if each of their experiences held a fragment of her own. When it was her turn, she wasn't sure what to say. Her heart was full, but the words felt trapped. After a brief moment of silence, she began speaking, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "My name is Olivia, and until recently, I didn't know who I was." The women listened attentively, their empathetic gazes encouraging her to continue. Olivia didn't reveal every detail, but she spoke about her isolation, the feeling of invisibility, and the anguish of living in a place where she couldn't be herself. When she finished, she realized that for the first time in years, she had spoken her truth out loud. There was no judgment, only understanding. As she left the NGO that evening, something inside her had shifted. It was as if a layer of fear and doubt had started to dissolve, allowing her to breathe a little more freely. Back at the mansion, the air felt lighter, even though the space was as silent as ever. She decided to walk into the garden, where the moonlight cast gentle shadows over the cacti. She sat on a stone bench, letting the cool night breeze touch her face. Her visit to the NGO echoed in her mind. It wasn't just the stories that moved her, but the sense of purpose each of those women had found, even in the face of adversity. Olivia felt a tightness in her chest. Why did she still cling to a world that didn't recognize her? Her gaze fell on a small table near the house's entrance, where a pile of old books had been abandoned. At the top, there was a worn notebook. She picked it up, feeling the texture of the pages beneath her fingers, and recognized her own handwriting. It was a notebook from years ago, where she used to write down thoughts, poems, and dreams. Flipping through it, she found a phrase that made her stop. To live is to find your own voice, even when it's drowned out by the shouts of others. Olivia stood still, staring at those words. It was a phrase she had written herself, but it felt like it belonged to someone else, a version of herself that still had hope and courage. She closed the notebook, holding it close to her chest. Later that night, when she unlocked the tablet, another message from Grace appeared. This time, it was longer. Olivia, you have a story that can inspire so many women. You've already taken the first step by leaving the mansion, but you can go further. Imagine how many others are living in silence, trapped like you once were. Your voice has power. Use it. Anna's words carried a different weight now. They weren't just a provocation. They were a call. Olivia stood up, still holding the notebook, and walked to the hallway mirror. Her reflection was the same. The elegant woman, molded in Ryan's image, but now, in her eyes, there was something new. Determination. It was no longer just about her. The women from the NGO, Anna's message, her own notebook. Everything pointed to an undeniable truth. Her struggle had a bigger meaning, a cause that transcended the emptiness of her own existence. Olivia didn't know exactly how, but right there in front of the mirror, she made a decision. She would find her voice again. Not just for herself, but for all the women who, like her, lived in silence. Olivia knew the confrontation was inevitable. Since the moment she left the mansion for the first time, an invisible chasm had widened between her and Ryan. The decision to face her husband, however, hadn't come suddenly. It had been days of reflection, sleepless nights, and above all, the impact of her connection with the NGO and the women she had met. The Olivia Ryan would encounter upon his return was not the same. When Ryan arrived late that night, the sound of his car echoed at the mansion's entrance. Olivia was in the living room waiting for him. That space, once the scene of so many uncomfortable silences, would now be the setting for words she had never dared to say. Ryan entered, taking off his blazer, looking indifferent, as if nothing in the house had changed in his absence. "It's late," he commented dryly, placing the keys on the table. "We need to talk," Olivia replied, her voice firm, yet calm. He stopped and looked at her for the first time since entering. There was something different about her, and it unsettled him. Ryan furrowed his brow, confused. "Now? Can't this wait until tomorrow?" "No, it can't," Olivia said. He sighed, irritated, but sat down in one of the armchairs. Olivia stood still, her gaze fixed on him. For a moment, Ryan felt uncomfortable, something that rarely happened. "What's so urgent?" he asked, his voice tinged with impatience. "Your absence," she began without hesitation, "not just physically, but emotionally. For years you've been distant, but now I see what it really means to be married to you." Ryan raised an eyebrow, surprised by Olivia's tone. "What are you talking about? I've always taken care of you. I've given you everything. This house, comfort, security. You think that's enough? That it replaces love, respect, or even treating me like someone with a voice? You molded me to be what you wanted, but in doing so, you destroyed who I was." Those words hit Ryan like a punch. He tried to interrupt her, but Olivia wouldn't relent. "I'm not finished," she said, raising her voice slightly. "I spent years wondering what I had done wrong, trying to convince myself it was my fault that you pulled away. But now I understand. You never wanted a partner. You wanted someone who would complete your image, not someone who was real." "That's ridiculous," Ryan shot back, rising from his seat. "You're being ungrateful. Do you have any idea how many people would give everything to have what you have?" Olivia didn't flinch. "I don't want your mansion, your jewelry, or the role of invisible wife. I want my life back." The silence that followed was thick. Ryan stared at her, trying to find the usual submission in her eyes, but it wasn't there anymore. "You don't know what you're saying, Olivia." "I know exactly what I'm saying. I'm not going to live by your rules anymore." Ryan said nothing, but his eyes showed a mix of anger and surprise. He had underestimated the strength she might have. In the days that followed, Olivia threw herself completely into her work with the NGO. She began organizing events to raise funds and raise awareness for the cause. Her story, initially shared only in small circles, began to spread. Blogs and social media highlighted her fight for freedom and the courage to break free from a suffocating marriage. Olivia didn't portray herself as a victim, but as someone who found the strength to start over. Meanwhile, Ryan faced growing rumors at social events. The absence of Olivia, once ignored, began to be questioned. Charlotte Mitchell, accustomed to being the center of attention beside Ryan, noticed something was different. "Ryan, people are talking about your wife. Is she involved in some social campaign?" Charlotte asked during a party in Denver. "That's no one's business," he responded curtly, but Charlotte couldn't miss the tension in his voice. Olivia, on the other hand, kept growing. Her voice resonated beyond the mansion, inspiring women to rise against the constraints that silence them. She was discovering not only the power she had over her own life, but also the impact she could have on the world around her. Charlotte Mitchell had always had a sharp instinct for detecting when something was wrong, a skill refined after years of navigating the most selective circles of Mexican society. Though Ryan was an impeccable partner in public, his growing unease in recent times didn't escape her keen eye. She noticed the whispered comments at events, the discreet glances, and most notably, the way Ryan seemed to avoid answering questions about Olivia. Her curiosity, already piqued, became determination after a casual conversation in Denver. "Is it true that Ryan's wife is organizing social events?" a socialite had asked, while Charlotte forced a smile, masking her discomfort. That very night, Charlotte began her investigation. A quick online search revealed mentions of the NGO Olivia was involved with. Small photos, blog posts, but enough to realize that Olivia was no longer playing the role of the invisible wife. She spent hours reading testimonies from women who spoke about the impact Olivia had had on their lives. Each word felt like a blow to her confidence that Ryan had full control of the situation. Determined to confront the truth, Charlotte did more than just read. She used her contacts, sought out discreet information, and within a few days, she uncovered the details of Ryan and Olivia's relationship. The forced isolation, the control over his wife's image, and the stark contrast to his public life. The more she discovered, the more her disdain for Ryan grew. A few weeks later, at a gala in Phoenix, Charlotte decided it was time to act. The room was filled with businessmen, investors, and figures of the elite, all gathered to celebrate Ryan's latest venture. Charlotte, stunning in a red dress, moved through the room like a predator already tasting victory. She waited for the right moment, when Ryan was making a toast with other magnates, surrounded by them as if he were the center of a universe. With a smile that didn't reach her eyes, Charlotte walked over and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Ryan, you forgot to mention someone very important to this success. Your wife, Olivia, or should I say, your invisible wife." The room froze. Ryan's expression darkened, and he tried to regain control of the situation with a forced laugh. "Charlotte, I think you're mistaken." But she didn't back down. "No, Ryan, I'm not. Everyone here should know that while you display a perfect life, your wife is rebuilding hers away from your shadow. She's dedicating herself to helping women who have suffered the same kind of control and manipulation you forced her to endure." Her words echoed through the room, leaving a trail of shock among the guests. Ryan tried to intervene, but the damage had already been done. Murmurs began to spread, and suspicious looks turned toward him. For the first time in years, Ryan felt the ground open beneath his feet. In the following days, the scandal hit the media. Headlines explored Ryan's double life, exposing how he had isolated Olivia and treated her as a mere piece of his facade. Blogs and social media amplified the impact, and Ryan's carefully constructed reputation began to crumble. Contracts were delayed, partners withdrew, and social events that once revered him now avoided him. While Ryan dealt with the chaos, Olivia remained focused on the NGO. With the increased visibility brought on by the scandal, new resources flooded in, and Olivia seized the opportunity to expand the initiatives, providing support to more women in underserved areas. She became a symbol of strength and resilience, but she remained firm in not using her story as a means of vengeance. Anna, always watchful, contacted her again. "Olivia, this is going to draw even more attention to you. It's important to decide how you want to use this visibility." "Gee, I don't want to deviate from what matters, Anna. It's not about Ryan. It's about all the women who are still trapped like I was." Anna smiled from the other side of the line. "And that's why your voice is so powerful." With Anna's guidance, Olivia began participating in online campaigns and interviews, ensuring that the narrative stayed focused on the cause, not the scandal. While Ryan scrambled to salvage the pieces of his reputation, Olivia moved forward, proving that sometimes the real power lies in leaving behind what once held us captive. The weeks after the scandal were intense for Olivia. The aftermath of her story and her work with the NGO had brought a visibility she never imagined. However, despite the hectic pace, she remained focused. Her life now had a clear purpose, and each day was an opportunity to impact more women. It was on an ordinary morning, while Olivia sat in her office at the NGO reviewing reports, that Sophie entered with an expression of excitement. "Olivia, I just got this by email," Sophie said, handing her an envelope. Olivia opened it, reading the message carefully. It was a formal invitation for her to be a speaker at a national conference on female empowerment, to be held in USA City. The event would bring together leaders, activists, and prominent voices from across the country. Olivia would be one of the keynote speakers. For a moment, she didn't react. "They want me to speak?" she asked, still processing the information. Sophie smiled. "Of course they do. Your story is inspiring. You represent something that many women need to hear." In the days that followed, Olivia threw herself into preparing her speech. She wanted her words to be authentic and impactful. She spent hours at night, reviewing drafts, scribbling ideas in a notebook, and crossing out entire paragraphs that didn't feel right. Every word had to carry the weight of her journey, but also convey hope. "I don't want this to be about what I lost," she thought. "I want it to be about what I've gained and what other women can gain." She wrote about her childhood in Austin, her passion for books, and the freedom she felt working at the bookstore. She mentioned life in the mansion, the isolation, and the internal struggle to regain her identity. But she also highlighted the strength she had found by connecting with other women and how, together, they had transformed pain into action. On the big day, Olivia arrived in USA City early, feeling a mixture of nervousness and determination. The auditorium was vast, with hundreds of seats filling up as women of all ages and backgrounds filled the room. Some were leaders of social movements, others students or workers seeking inspiration. When her name was announced, Olivia's heart raced. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and walked onto the stage amidst warm applause. The bright stage lights illuminated the packed auditorium, but she focused on the first rows, where Sophie and several women from the NGO smiled encouragingly. She began to speak, her voice initially soft but steady. She shared her story with honesty, without unnecessary dramatizations. She spoke of the pain of losing herself and the challenge of fighting against fear. But she also celebrated the small victories, the moments of courage that, when added up, brought her to that very moment. "The silence is a prison," she said, one of the most powerful moments of her speech. "And many times, we ourselves put the chains on, thinking we have no other choice. But I discovered that there is strength in vulnerability and power in unity. And if I, who once felt invisible, can be here today, then you too can find your voice." When she finished, the silence in the auditorium was quickly replaced by an explosion of applause. Olivia was taken aback by the intensity. Women stood up, applauding her, some with tears in their eyes. After the event, several women approached her to share their own stories. One young woman explained how she had found the courage to leave an abusive relationship after reading about Olivia's work with the NGO. Another spoke about the impact Olivia's actions were having in distant communities. Each account reinforced the purpose Olivia had embraced. In the days that followed, excerpts from her speech began circulating on social media. Videos recorded by attendees went viral, reaching people from other countries. International organizations reached out, praising her message and inviting her to events outside USA. Ryan's life had crumbled like a house of cards. The man who once controlled every narrative was now the focus of a public exposé that laid bare his personal and professional flaws. After the scandal in Phoenix, he found himself isolated, with friends and business partners avoiding him. For the first time in years, Ryan was no longer the center of attention. The grandeur of his mansion in Denver now seemed empty, each room echoing the silence he had never noticed before. In the first few days, Ryan tried to blame everyone around him: Charlotte, the media, even Olivia. But as the weeks passed and the dust of the scandal began to settle, he was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. All of this had been caused by his own actions. In the solitude of his home, Ryan found himself looking inward in a way he never had before. One morning, wandering aimlessly through the mansion, he stumbled upon a drawer full of old photographs. There, among images of lavish events, was a picture of Olivia, taken shortly after their wedding. She stood in a garden, no makeup, her hair loose, with a genuine smile on her face. Ryan held the photo for a long time, realizing he hadn't seen her like this in years. Motivated by a desire for change, he began searching for ways to do something meaningful, something that might somehow repair the damage he had caused. That was when he remembered the NGO where Olivia worked. He reached out to Sophie, the coordinator, asking to meet her at a discreet cafe in the city. "I know I'm the last person you want to see," Ryan began, his tone more humble than Sophie had expected. "But I'm here because I want to do something useful, not to win back Olivia, just something that makes sense." Sophie sized him up carefully. She didn't trust him fully, but there was something about his demeanor that seemed genuine. After a lengthy conversation, she suggested he contribute to the NGO in a unique way. "There's an artist who works with us, Sophie Johnson. She creates works that tell stories of transformation. Maybe you could commission something from her, something that symbolizes what Olivia represents now." Ryan agreed. He worked closely with Sophie Johnson, sharing his ideas and making it clear that the piece should reflect Olivia's freedom and strength. The artist dove into the project, creating a painting that depicted a woman walking toward the horizon, leaving behind shadows that could no longer catch her. When the artwork was completed, Ryan delivered it personally to the NGO without fanfare or speeches. He only asked Sophie to ensure that Olivia saw it. Meanwhile, Olivia was experiencing an entirely different moment in her life. Her leadership at the NGO was growing day by day. Organizing events, forming strategies, and building partnerships, she had become a national symbol of female empowerment. Women from all over the country sought the organization, inspired by her story and all that she represented. One afternoon, while at the NGO, Olivia received the painting. Sophie handed it to her without mentioning Ryan, only saying it was a gift. When Olivia saw the piece, she stood silent for a moment. The image moved her deeply, but it also prompted reflection. Ryan seemed to finally understand that she was no longer the submissive woman he had molded. Days later, Ryan made a substantial donation to the NGO, but he made no attempt to contact Olivia directly. He understood that any effort at reconciliation would be in vain. His intention wasn't to rebuild their marriage. It was to support something greater, something he now understood: the impact of Olivia's freedom and autonomy. One afternoon, Ryan visited one of the NGO's events without notice. He stood quietly at the back of the room, watching Olivia speak to a group of women. She had a magnetic presence, exuding strength and empathy. When the event ended, he saw her laughing with other women in the distance, and he decided to leave without approaching her. For Olivia, she felt her path was finally clear. Ryan had become part of her past, not her future. The painting, his support for the NGO, it was all significant, but she knew that her journey was now about something greater than any form of reparation. She was rebuilding her life, her identity, and her impact on the world. Ryan, in his own way, had finally understood that. Olivia's work at the NGO had reached new heights. With the growing number of partnerships and national recognition, Sophie proposed an idea that would further expand the impact of their work, transforming the NGO into a foundation with a larger structure and reach. The idea resonated deeply with Olivia, who saw it as an opportunity to extend support to vulnerable women far beyond the city's borders. Thus, the concept of the Renacimiento Foundation was born. The name, chosen by Olivia, carried the weight of her journey and the symbolism of transformation. It was a rebirth, not just for her, but for all the women who sought to rebuild their lives. Despite initial hesitations, Olivia knew she would need help to turn the dream into a reality. It was Sophie who suggested including Ryan in the project. He has the contacts, the business experience, and the resources to make this sustainable. And if he wants to help, we can use that to benefit the women, Sophie proposed. Olivia thought it over, then agreed. When she presented the idea to Ryan, he immediately accepted without hesitation. "I don't want my help to be about the past," he said seriously. "I want this to mean something true for the future." In the following months, Ryan immersed himself in the strategic planning, while Olivia and Sophie led the vision and values of the foundation. Ryan used his network to attract investors and corporate partners, explaining that the foundation would not be just a charity, but an entity combining social impact with sustainability. The launch event was held in a restored warehouse in Portland, which became the first center for the Renacimiento Foundation. The space, once abandoned, now vibrated with life. Rooms for workshops, spaces for psychological support, and areas designated for professional training courses. The ceremony was simple but filled with meaning. In the center of the space, a massive mural dominated the scene. Created by a group of local artists, it depicted women of different ages, races and backgrounds, all united in an act of overcoming. At the top of the mural, Sophie Johnson's Renacimiento painting had been reproduced as a central symbol. Olivia stood before the artwork, moved. It was more than just art. It was a reflection of the impact their work was having on the world. During the opening speech, Olivia took the stage and addressed the crowd. She looked out over the audience, women who had found support through the foundation, community leaders, artists, and even curious onlookers. "This place is not just a social center," she began, her voice heavy with emotion. "It is a space of transformation. Every brick, every wall, every painting here carries the stories of women who decided to change their lives and, in doing so, change the world around them." The applause was heartfelt, and many in the crowd wiped away tears as they listened. Olivia felt the weight of that moment, but also the responsibility it carried. After the ceremony, while talking with guests, a familiar figure approached. It was Charlotte Mitchell. The reunion was unexpected, but there was no tension between them anymore. Charlotte, elegantly dressed as always, seemed uncomfortable, but determined to speak. "Olivia," she began, her voice hesitant, "I wanted to congratulate you on what you're doing here. It's impressive." Olivia looked at her calmly, studying the face of the woman who had once been a central figure in the collapse of her marriage. But instead of resentment, there was only understanding. "Thank you, Charlotte," she replied sincerely. The silence that followed was brief but filled with meaning. Then Charlotte continued, I wanted to say that I recognize the mistakes I've made, not just towards you, but towards myself. I think, in a way, I also lost myself in that pursuit of being someone I'm not. Olivia nodded, realizing that Charlotte's growth was real. We all have our journeys, Olivia said. What matters is what we do with what we've learned. Their exchange was brief, but it left an impact on both of them. Charlotte departed soon after, leaving Olivia with the sense that in some way the stories of all the women in that room, hers included, were connected. In the months that followed, the Portland Social Center became a model for other foundation projects. In addition to training and psychological support services, the space became a gathering point for cultural events and art exhibitions. The surrounding communities began to thrive, showing the real impact that the initiative was having. Businesses and organizations began to seek the foundation out to replicate the model in other parts of USA. But Olivia, as always, remained focused on the core mission. For her, every new center was a reminder that the work was only just beginning. After the launch of the Renacimiento Foundation, the relationship between Olivia and Ryan found a new balance. Both knew that for the project to thrive, it was necessary to establish clear boundaries. Olivia, now at the peak of her confidence and autonomy, insisted that her role as the leader in the field be respected, while Ryan, accepting his position behind the scenes, would use his business skills to ensure the foundation's financial stability. In a private meeting, they sat down to define their roles, a moment that years ago would have seemed unthinkable. I need you to understand, Ryan, Olivia began, her tone firm but calm. This is not about what you want for the foundation or for me. I decide the direction this project will take. If we agree on that, we can work together. Ryan nodded, recognizing the weight of her words. He wasn't there to regain control, but to contribute. I understand, Olivia. My role will be to secure resources, bring in partners, and structure whatever is necessary. But the heart of the foundation is yours. With that, a new kind of partnership was sealed. There was no room for disputes or egos. It was a strictly professional relationship based on mutual respect and focused on a greater goal. In the following months, this dynamic proved to be effective. While Ryan negotiated partnerships with major companies and investors, Olivia traveled throughout USA, visiting centers, leading workshops, and meeting with women who had found support through the foundation. Her presence became a transformative force, motivating entire communities to take action. One time, Sophie suggested that both of them visit one of the new support centers in Chiapas. It would be an opportunity to show Ryan the reality on the ground and the direct impact of the foundation's work. Although hesitant at first, he agreed. The journey was long and marked by narrow, dusty roads. When they arrived at the center, they were greeted by women who had overcome stories of violence, abandonment, and financial hardship. One woman, a young girl named Lily, shared how learning to sew through one of the foundation's courses had helped her open her own small workshop. Before this, I had nothing, Lily said, holding Olivia's hands. Now I can support my family and help other women in my community. Ryan, who had listened to the story in silence, approached and complimented the young woman's work. But what really touched him was the way Lily looked at Olivia, as though she were more than just a leader. She was a living inspiration. On the way back to the hotel, Ryan was lost in thought. During dinner, he spoke honestly. Olivia, I never understood how much all of this could change lives. She looked at him, surprised by his tone, but held her firm stance. It's because for a long time, you only saw what was convenient for you, Ryan. But the lives that are changing are not about you or me. They're about them. He nodded, accepting the critique without argument. For the first time, Ryan began to understand that his role in the foundation wasn't just about repairing his past. It was a chance to contribute to something greater than himself. Over time, this humility began to reflect in his actions. Ryan avoided the spotlight, refusing awards or recognition that went beyond his technical role. He understood that Olivia was the public face of the foundation, and that was a position she had earned through her own merit. Olivia, in turn, recognized his efforts, but in a private conversation after a planning meeting, she made it clear, "Ryan, I see how hard you're working to be part of this, and I appreciate it, but my journey is not connected to yours. What I do now is for me, for the women who help the foundation, and for everything I believe in." He smiled, a small but sincere smile. "I know, and that's how it should be." This exchange marked a new chapter in both of their lives. Ryan, though still carrying the shadows of the past, found purpose in helping in a genuine way. Olivia, for her part, reaffirmed her independence, driven by the desire to continue transforming lives. The impact of the Renacimiento Foundation had grown to proportions Olivia never imagined. The work that had started as a small NGO in USA now reached beyond borders, with social centers being inaugurated in other Latin American countries such as Canada, Germany, and Australia. The expansion was the result of years of dedication, but also something greater, the universal message that when women are empowered, they can transform entire communities. Olivia was now recognized as a global voice in female empowerment. Invited to events and international conferences, she carried with her the stories of the women she had met throughout her journey. At a forum in Toronto, France, she highlighted the impact of social entrepreneurship as a tool for transformation. In Londres, she participated in a panel on gender equality, sharing the specific challenges faced by women in Latin America. "There is no one-size-fits-all formula," she said in her speeches, "but there is one common starting point: listening to women, understanding their stories, and giving them the tools to shape their own destinies." The international recognition didn't pull her away from her roots. Whenever she returned to USA, she made sure to visit the local centers of the foundation, speaking with the women, hearing their stories, and looking for ways to improve the programs offered. It was through direct contact that she found the motivation to keep going. Despite her packed schedule, Olivia kept a personal habit that helped her process everything: a journal. On quiet nights in the mansion or hotel rooms around the world, she wrote. The pages of her journal were filled with reflections on the steps she had taken, the challenges she had faced, and above all, the lessons she had learned. "Today, I spoke to a room full of women in Paris," she wrote in one entry. "But as I shared my story, I realized that each of them had their own battle. I'm no different, I'm just a voice among many. Transformation is a continuous process, and I still have so much to learn and teach." Ryan, on the other hand, remained involved in the foundation, but always in a discreet role. He oversaw the financial expansion and helped ensure the logistical aspects were in place to support the global growth. In meetings, he listened more than he spoke, learning to respect Olivia's space as the leader and symbol of the foundation. One time, during a planning meeting, Ryan surprised Olivia by publicly praising her work in front of the team. "Olivia has a vision that goes beyond what any number can measure. It's a privilege to be part of this, even in a modest way." Olivia thanked him with a small smile, but his words meant more than she let on. It was a sign that Ryan, once so obsessed with control, now understood that her prominence was not negotiable. One of the most emotional moments for Olivia came during the opening of a center in Sydney, Canada. As she walked through the newly opened space, she was approached by a young woman named Valeria, who was holding a copy of her book, Renacimiento. "This book changed my life," Valeria said, tears welling in her eyes. "I thought my story didn't matter, that no one would listen. But you gave me hope. Olivia took Valeria's hands, feeling the weight of her words. Moments like that were reminders that the impact of the foundation went beyond numbers. It was about human connections, about touching lives in ways that weren't always visible, but were deeply felt. Upon returning to USA, Olivia stopped at the entrance of the mansion and looked out at the horizon. The past, which once felt like a shadow, was now simply a part of a long journey. She knew there was still much to be done, but she felt ready for the future. That night, as she wrote in her journal, she reflected, "Transformation never ends. There are always new voices to amplify, new stories to tell. My role is not to be the protagonist, but the bridge. And as long as there are women willing to cross that bridge, the work will be worth it." Olivia faced the future with unwavering determination. Her impact was now global, but her essence remained rooted in the stories of the women she had met along the way. Ryan, for his part, continued to support her, learning from her and respecting the space they had built together. And as the Renacimiento Foundation grew, Olivia's legacy solidified as a source of inspiration for women around the world. The sun was beginning to set over the mansion, painting the sky in golden and pink hues. Olivia sat on the porch, reviewing documents for the Renacimiento Foundation, when Ryan appeared. He hesitated for a moment before approaching, his hands in his pockets, visibly uncomfortable. She looked up, surprised by his unexpected presence, but maintained the firm and serene posture she had learned to adopt in his presence. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quieter and more contained than usual. Olivia nodded, closing the folder and indicating a chair nearby. Ryan sat down but remained silent for a few moments, as if organizing his words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began finally. "About us, about everything that's happened." Olivia crossed her arms, not in a gesture of resistance, but as a shield, waiting for what he would say next. Ryan took a deep breath before continuing. "I know I made a lot of mistakes. I tried to control you, your life, your image. I thought it was love, but in reality, it was fear. Fear of losing control, fear of not being enough." Olivia remained silent, watching him carefully. This was the first time he had openly admitted what she had felt for so many years. "You had so much light, Olivia. And instead of valuing that, I tried to put it out so you would fit into my world." He paused, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I just want you to know that I understand now." Olivia took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his words. "It's not about forgiveness, Ryan," she replied, her voice calm but firm. "It's about recognizing what happened and ensuring it never happens again." He looked at her, surprised by her strength. "That's why I want whatever relationship we have, whatever it is, to be based on respect. We are partners in the foundation, nothing more, and as partners, we need to work together, but as equals." Ryan nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. He wasn't there to regain control, but to contribute. "I agree, and I want you to know that I admire what you've built, Olivia, what you've become." In the days that followed, the dynamic between them changed. Ryan began to treat her not as someone who needed guidance, but as a leader whose vision was crucial for the success of the foundation. He stepped back when necessary, allowing Olivia to shine, while using his skills to ensure the technical and financial aspects of the project ran smoothly. An opportunity to strengthen this new partnership arose during a trip to rural Guerrero, where a new center for the foundation was going to be inaugurated. The journey was long, marked by narrow, winding roads, but it provided a moment for reflection and dialogue between them. "I never imagined I would be here traveling with you for something like this," Ryan commented, gazing out the car window at the mountainous landscape. Neither did I, Olivia admitted, offering a small smile. When they arrived at the center, they were welcomed by a crowd of women and children. The location, once an abandoned school, had been transformed into a vibrant space for support and learning. During the visit, they heard emotional stories of overcoming challenges, like that of Emily, a woman who had started her own small embroidery business with the foundation's support. "What you're doing here has changed my life," Emily said, her eyes shining with gratitude. As they listened to the stories, Olivia and Ryan exchanged glances. They didn't need to say anything. The impact of the work spoke for itself. In that moment, they both realized that despite their complicated past, they were connected by something larger. On the way back, during the sunset, Ryan broke the silence. "I'll never be able to erase what I did in the past, but maybe this is a way to do something good." Olivia looked at him, weighing his words. "The past doesn't disappear, Ryan, but what we do now is what matters." He nodded, and a comfortable silence settled between them. Although the traumas they shared would never be fully erased, they had found a way to move forward, turning that pain into action. Ryan, once obsessed with control, now contributed with humility, while Olivia reaffirmed her independence and purpose. After years of leading the Renacimiento Foundation, Olivia began to feel the need to document her journey. It was something she had been considering for months, ever since her first speeches. The women who approached her after each event, sharing their own stories of pain and survival, made her realize that her journey was not hers alone. It was a shared journey, lived by millions of women around the world. And it was time to put it into words. One evening, sitting in her small library at the mansion, Olivia opened a simple notebook, the same one that had accompanied her during the first steps of her freedom. With a pen in hand and a deep sigh, she wrote at the top of the page, "Renacimiento." It marked the beginning of a project that would consume months of her life, but would also reconnect her with parts of herself she thought she had forgotten. Writing the book was both liberating and painful. Each chapter was a reflection on the moments that shaped her. Her youth in Austin, the early days of her marriage to Ryan, the years of isolation in the mansion, and the night Grace had appeared in the garden. Olivia didn't hold back on the details, describing the hardships she endured, but she also dedicated pages to her victories. She wrote about the strength she found in the NGO, the women who inspired her, and most of all, about the power of vulnerability turned into action. "This book isn't for me," she told Sophie, who had been supporting her throughout the process. "It's for every woman still trapped in a silence she didn't choose." Olivia revisited each word carefully, making sure the tone was honest and relatable. She didn't want to appear heroic, she wanted to be real, accessible. When she finally finished the manuscript, she felt a mixture of relief and nervousness. It was like exposing her soul to the world, but she knew it had to be done. The launch of Renacimiento was planned to take place in an auditorium in the heart of USA City. On the day of the event, Olivia was surrounded by people who had been part of her journey. Sophie, some women from the foundation, and even Ryan, who had discreetly offered logistical support for the publication. The space was packed with people of all ages and backgrounds, eager to hear the words of a woman whose story had become a symbol of resilience. When Olivia stepped onto the stage, holding a copy of the book, the entire room stood up and applauded. She took a deep breath, feeling the weight and responsibility of the moment. With a calm smile, she began to speak. "Writing this book felt like reliving parts of myself I thought I had lost," she said, "but it was also a journey of discovery. I discovered that freedom isn't a destination. It's a path we walk every day." At the end of the event, Olivia read the dedication she had written with all her heart. to all the women who face imposed silences, who feel invisible or forgotten. May this book be a reminder that your voice matters and that you are never alone. The words resonated deeply with the audience. Some cried, others applauded, and then a long line formed for her to autograph the copies. For hours, Olivia listened to stories from women who had found courage through the work of the foundation, or who simply connected with parts of her journey. After the launch, Renacimiento quickly became a success. The book was translated into several languages and began circulating in reading groups, schools, and international forums. Videos of her readings spread across social media, and the impact was immediate. Women from different parts of the world began sharing their own stories, many inspired by Olivia's narrative. Critics praised the book not only for its sincerity, but also for the way it connected personal experiences to global issues. International organizations used Renacimiento as the foundation for discussions on female empowerment, and Olivia was invited to more events around the world. The project for the largest social center of the Renacimiento Foundation in Portland was a dream that Olivia had nurtured for years. Located in an old, abandoned factory on the outskirts of the city, the site represented, in many ways, the heart of the Foundation's mission, transforming forgotten spaces into places of hope and rebuilding. For months, the team worked to reimagine the space, bringing together architects, volunteers, and local artists. Every detail was designed to reflect the essence of the foundation and, most importantly, to serve the women and families who would seek support there. On the day of the grand opening, the social center was a vibrant spectacle of colors and life. The massive warehouse spaces now housed rooms for workshops, psychological support offices, professional training areas, and even a cultural performance auditorium. Olivia walked through the site, taking in what had once only been a dream. In the center of the main courtyard, a giant mural dominated the scene. Created by a group of local artists, it depicted women of various ages, races, and backgrounds, all united in a movement of overcoming. At the top of the mural, Sophie Johnson's Renacimiento painting had been reproduced as a central symbol. Olivia stopped in front of the artwork, deeply moved. It was more than just art. It was a reflection of the impact their work was having on the world. During the opening ceremony, Olivia took the stage and addressed the crowd. There were women in the audience who had found support through the foundation, community leaders, artists, and even curious onlookers. The energy in the air was palpable. "This place is not just a social center," she began, her voice filled with emotion. "It is a space for transformation. Every brick, every wall, every painting here carries the stories of women who decided to change their lives, and in doing so, changed the world around them." The applause was heartfelt, and many in the crowd wiped away tears as they listened. Olivia felt the strength of that moment, but also the responsibility it brought. After the ceremony, as she spoke with the guests, a familiar figure approached. It was Charlotte Mitchell. The encounter was unexpected, but there was no longer the tension that had once defined their relationship. Charlotte, elegantly dressed as always, seemed uncomfortable, but determined to speak. "Olivia," she began, her voice hesitant, "I wanted to congratulate you on everything you're doing here. It's impressive." Olivia looked at her calmly, taking in the face of the woman who had once played a central role in the collapse of her marriage. But instead of resentment, there was only understanding. "Thank you, Charlotte," she replied genuinely. The silence that followed was brief, but full of meaning. Then Charlotte continued, "I wanted to say that I recognize the mistakes I've made. Not just toward you, but toward myself. I think, in a way, I also lost myself in that pursuit of being someone I'm not." Olivia nodded, realizing that Charlotte's growth was genuine. "We all have our journeys," Olivia said. "What matters is what we do with what we've learned." The exchange was brief, but it left an impact on both of them. Charlotte left soon after, leaving Olivia with the feeling that, somehow, the stories of all the women in the room, including her own, were connected. In the months that followed, the Portland Social Center became a model for other projects of the foundation. In addition to offering training and psychological support services, the space became a hub for cultural events and art exhibitions. The surrounding communities began to thrive, showing the real impact the initiative was having. Businesses and organizations began to approach the foundation, seeking to replicate the model in other parts of USA. But Olivia, as always, kept her focus on the core mission. For her, each new center was a reminder that the work had only just begun. The Renacimiento Foundation had reached dimensions Olivia had never imagined. The work that had started as a small NGO in USA now spanned borders, with social centers being inaugurated in other Latin American countries such as Canada, Germany, and Australia. The expansion was the result of years of dedication, but also something greater. The universal message that when women are empowered, they can transform entire communities. Olivia was now recognized as a global voice in female empowerment. Invited to events and conferences worldwide, she carried the stories of the women she had met along her journey. At a forum in Toronto, France, she emphasized the impact of social entrepreneurship as a tool for transformation. In Londres, she participated in a panel on gender equality, sharing the specific challenges women face in Latin America. "There is no one-size-fits-all solution," she said in her speeches. "But there is a common starting point: listening. Listening to women, understanding their stories, and providing them with the tools to shape their own futures." International recognition didn't pull her away from her roots. Whenever she returned to USA, she made sure to visit the local centers of the foundation, speak with the women, hear their stories, and find ways to improve the programs. It was through these direct connections that she found the motivation to keep going. Despite her busy schedule, Olivia maintained a personal habit that helped her process everything: a journal. On quiet nights at the mansion or in hotel rooms around the world, she wrote. The pages of her journal were filled with reflections on the steps she had taken, the challenges she had faced, and above all, the lessons she had learned. "Today I spoke to a room full of women in Paris," she wrote in one entry. "But as I shared my story, I realized that each of them had their own battle. I'm no different. I'm just a voice among many. Transformation is a continuous process, and I still have much to learn and to teach." Ryan, for his part, remained involved in the foundation, though always in a discreet role. He oversaw the financial expansion and helped ensure the logistical aspects were in place for the global growth. In meetings, he listened more than he spoke, learning to respect Olivia's space as the leader and symbol of the foundation. One time during a planning meeting, Ryan surprised Olivia by publicly praising her work in front of the team. "Olivia has a vision that goes beyond what any number can measure. It's a privilege to be part of this, even in a modest way." Olivia smiled briefly, but his words meant more than she let on. It was a sign that Ryan, once obsessed with control, now understood that her prominence was not negotiable. One of the most emotional moments for Olivia came during the inauguration of a center in Sydney, Canada. As she walked through the newly opened space, she was approached by a young woman named Valeria, who was holding a copy of her book, Renacimiento. "This book changed my life," Valeria said, her eyes filled with tears. "I thought my story didn't matter, that no one would listen, but you gave me hope." Olivia held Valeria's hands, feeling the weight of her words. Moments like these were reminders that the impact of the foundation went beyond numbers. It was about human connections, about touching lives in ways that were not always visible, but were deeply felt. On the way back to USA, Olivia stopped at the entrance of the mansion and looked out at the horizon. The past, once a shadow, now felt like simply a part of a long journey. She knew there was much more to do, but she felt ready for the future. That night, as she wrote in her journal, she reflected, "Transformation never ends. There are always new voices to amplify, new stories to tell. My role is not to be the protagonist, but the bridge, and as long as there are women willing to cross that bridge, the work will be worth it." Olivia faced the future with an unshakable determination. Her impact was now global, but her essence remained rooted in the stories of the women she had met along the way. Ryan, for his part, continued to support her, learning from her and respecting the space they had created together. And as the Renacimiento Foundation grew, Olivia's legacy became a source of inspiration for women across the globe.